if you wanted to produce a sort of very swift timeline of its history, it's obviously important to focus on the moments when lots of territory was lost to foreign invaders. And these are actually three main moments. There's the Arab conquests in the 630s. This is a decade. In a decade, that war was lost. It is the Seljuk Turk conquest of Asia Minor, modern Turkey, in the 1070s. And that was very swift and partly reversed afterwards, but only partly. And then there's the Fourth Crusade, 1204, when the armies from mostly France sack, conquer Constantinople, and dismember the empire as much as they could. It didn't last that long. The Romans managed to regroup and recover. But those are the three main crisis points. They are very swift, but they cause incredible damage. For all the rest of its history, it is a state and society that is generally sort of consolidating, regrouping, and generally engaged in slow but steady economic growth, territorial expansion, a small scale but steady. Mm-hmm. So we can talk about this. I think it's an important thing to keep in mind about the big picture, that the defeats were swift and kind of terrible, but the most of its history is one of slow growth.
There's some traumatic events that have a big impact, but a lot of the developments we'll talk about, it might seem or feel like there's a particular moment when those developments or changes in the way the government or the military is structured arise, but really it's a gradual process. And
exactly.
So that's the tension we have to be constantly dancing with.
Yeah, so as historians, this is a point of method, and it's very important. There are moments when individuals with a great deal of power make choices that impact everybody else and have, long-term consequences downstream. Constantine's conversion to Christianity, for example, right? Not something that anybody could have or did predict. Okay. Otherwise, most of the developments that we identify by specific dates, like you mentioned 395, the division of the Eastern and the Western empires, those are conventional dates that we use to actually capture what is, in fact, a much longer process. There was no split between the two halves. It was one among many allocations of jurisdiction to one son and another son in the East and the West. The two halves were subsequently reunited. Then they kind of divided again among different emperors. It's just a process. And so we sometimes use fixed dates for what is in fact a process. Or for 76, the fall of the Western Empire, this is the last date. It's actually a very long process that took decades. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's just something to keep in mind, that sometimes we're talking about processes, sometimes we're talking about very discrete events with long-term consequences. Yeah.